what we say that we find is when you get to know people in this kind of deaf conscious community, because people have authentic conversations about death and dying and feelings and emotions and like really raw stuff, they become really dependable people because
Mm,
they're kind of authentic people because you
yeah,
get to know all parts of them in a way over time. So the friendships and relationships really go really deep. It feels like you really are there for each other, if that makes sense.
yeah, yeah.
So I feel that that is really valuable, I guess, for me. That again, I'm not holding everything. It's like we're all holding each other somehow.
We all are gonna die. 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 Why don't we help each other prepare for it? Without death, there could not be life. I'm talking about end of life conversations, conversations about the end of life. Death and dying, grief and loss, conversations about the end of life.
Welcome, friends. On this episode, we're speaking with Jennie Beth Banks. Jennie is a creative director of Death Dancer, which is based in Olympia, Washington, not too far from me. Death Dancer creates creative and sacred spaces, hosting arts and cultural events and group activities, we'll talk about more, relating to death, dying, loss, and living, just for the purpose of fostering community in the Puget Sound, the South Puget Sound area in Washington State. That's where Olympia rests in our area here, South Puget Sound, South Salish Sea, if you will.
Yes. Jenny founded Death Dancer after a personal illness experience and after being faced with her own mortality. She conducted interviews with death professionals, which inspired an art exhibit about death and grief at the Fall Olympia Arts Walk in October of 2024. Since then, Death Dancer has developed and hosted a wide range of events and workshops in the area and has grown beyond Jenny and into a unique community of death conscious people within the Olympia area. Thank you so much for being with us, Jenny.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for
So good.
inviting.
So great to have you. I'm glad you're here. Why don't we start? We like to begin by asking when you first became aware of death. It's always seems like a good way to start because people sort of tell us more about who they are and how they got here, right?
Right, right. Well, I always feel like the older we get, the longer that story is.
Yeah.
Maybe if that makes sense. So yeah, so I'm from England originally. I've been in America 10 years, and now America is my home. So I guess like most people, I'm in my early 50s, and I guess like most people, maybe grew up in a place where death wasn't talked about very much. It obviously was happening all around with family members, friends dying and going to funerals as a child, but it was kind of very ritualistic and the kind of standard things we do, and then you don't talk about it anymore. And then the next one comes and you don't talk about it. So you kind of carry it, but you don't really process it in any way. Maybe it's only nowadays we're starting to look back at that and realize how that impacted us as people, that we did not have um, kind of a space to share our grief or to process our grief at that time. So for me, I would say looking back, I was very conscious of that. I was very aware that that was going on around me, and very aware that there was no conversation around it. And then when I was in my late 20s, I was a Buddhist nun, and my step nephew was dying of cancer. He was 26 years old, and he had a very sudden diagnosis, and it all happened very quickly. He was kind of gone within 5 weeks, and
Mm,
um, in one sense, because I was a Buddhist nun, I was kind of able to um, kind of offer prayers at his bedside and help him through that process at the end, and help the family and support the family. Um, so I would say, so that was actually 20 years ago, and I would say that was like looking back, that was my first death that I witnessed and that I was kind of around. Um, and then, you put it's always there in the background, but then, you carry on with life. And I'd always been interested in helping people write their wills, write their eulogies. I'd always thought that was important, that we prepare for it. So I've always had that interest. But then I would say it wasn't until my own illness and my own uh, connection with my own mortality where it really kind of struck home. And that's when
Mm.
I was like, oh my goodness, I'm really not prepared. Even though I was practicing Buddhist, I thought I was kind of okay around death. And we do death meditation a lot. We talk about death. It's not so, but suddenly it became more real for me.
Mhm.
Um, so I experienced carbon monoxide poisoning and did not die from it, but I also had lots of other symptoms that I later found out were um, kind of toxicity from too much B6 vitamin that
Mm.
really affected my nervous system. So there were times when I literally said, I think I'm dying.
Mhm.
Who knows whether I was, who knows whether, with the carbon monoxide poisoning, how close I was to dying. But I definitely went through that process. I've been very sick for a long time, for quite a number of um, about 3 years. So I guess when you're laid in bed thinking, I don't want to die yet, I kind of got to this point of like, I think I was late 40s at that point. I was like, no, I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready to go yet. Please, whoever's listening, don't let this happen yet. I've got too much to do.
Right.
So I just have this kind of surge of like energy of like, no, I can't. So kind of like from typing. Um, so I Yeah, so I would say that was when it really hit me of like, "Oh my goodness, yeah," the reality that I was going to die at some point,
Mhm.
even
Yeah.
though I had this, quite deep, feeling of, "But please just not yet."
Yeah. Yeah.
And I realized I did have a lot of anxiety around it, and I needed to deal with that. So I started to interview deaf professionals as part of my process to kind of immerse myself in it and say to people, okay, I do have this death anxiety, but do I really know enough about it to kind of deal with that? So I want to talk with people who are around it and
Mhm.
explore it a lot more. So that's kind of how my work, I guess, started and how my relationship with death began.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is some lifelong journey you've been on.
Right.
So, could you tell us about what is your current work?
Actually have a day job where I'm a grant writer for a nonprofit for people with disabilities. And then the work I'm doing now relating to death care is I did decide to train as an end of life doula because I felt there's definitely this space I want to work in more and to help people around end of life. Um, but separately to that, I was kind of going through my own process of after I was doing these interviews with people, I started getting lots of ideas for art pieces in my head, like creative ideas, and they are what I would call more conceptual art, where they're not. I say they're not necessarily pretty art, but they're conceptual art that I put together that kind of triggers conversations around death or dying or grief,
Mm.
and gets conversations going. I always say my pieces seem to be like a mirror, so they read my story of what the piece is about, and many times people say, "Oh yeah, that reminds me of when my mum died. That reminds me of my experience of grief." So that kind of idea of using art in that way seemed to be developing. So then someone said to me, "Hey, do you can show your art at the Arts Walk in Olympia." So this was last year. And then someone else said, "Hey, do you know there's a new grant at the city they're going to be doing for arts and culture and public programming?" So suddenly it became this like new thing of like, oh well, yeah, I'm gonna go for that grant and I'm gonna try and show some of this art at the Arts Walk. But knowing that it was a lot more edgy maybe than most of the arts at the Arts Walk, and it was going to be more maybe deeper and get these conversations going. So it was a little bit of an experiment. Um, so um, so I basically created 27 pieces of art by October last year, and I showcased it at the Arts Walk in October. But then all these people I've been interviewing, I was building up a lot of really good relationships and collaborations with people in the community who work in deaf care. So I'd say to them, after the Arts Walk, why don't we do a whole month like mini deaf festival and just do lots of events around death and dying and grief?
Mm.
So we did a whole month of October in the same venue. And so the art was available for people to see beyond the Arts Walk. And then I think we did 19 different events, all
Wow.
different workshops,
Wow.
different ways. And the idea of it was basically just to bring people in the community together around the topic in so many different ways. So,
Yeah.
many different things. Um, so after that, obviously then people were like, "Oh, is that it? Can we keep going?" And, we'd only got this finite grant to do that, and we were like, "Well, let's see what we can do." And then I have a colleague, Rebecca, who's also an end of life doula. She kind of really helped me with that arts walk, and she said, "Well, we could work together to do more events, keep going with it, more events." So one of the main topics people seem to say they needed was more gatherings around grief, more people getting together to share their grief experiences and share their stories and personal experiences with each other. So we started a monthly grief gathering.
Mhm.
Initially, it started in the Christmas, New Year period as a way to like get people together or on their own at the holidays, or
Yeah.
maybe strongly missing their person around those holiday times. Um, and it kind of grew from that. We're like, let's see how it goes, and people responded well, and we said, okay, well, let's just keep going. Then let's find other venues and do this once a month. And so we just
Mm.
kept doing that, and we ended up developing a format of where we do a meditation at the beginning. Um, uh, Different kind of meditations, but something that's more contemplative and kind of going a bit more deeper with some of these concepts. And then we go around the circle, but we focus on a certain topic. So we don't make it a general, like, come and tell us how you're feeling today. We try and focus it and really talk about certain topics around grief
Mm.
from your experience. So it becomes like a shared collective wisdom. So we're listening to each other and we're saying, oh, yeah, though, relating to that topic, this is my experience of my grief. And we
Mhm.
find that that really kind of transforms the energy, and people really get a lot out of listening to each other's experiences and realizing, they're not alone and they're not the only one who's lost someone and they're not the only one going through this process.
Yeah.
Uh, so that's been really powerful. And then at the end of each session, we spend 30 minutes at the end doing some like somatic work, some art. So we either do drawing or writing a poem. So they have to, the idea is that they process and they kind of don't leave with it all in the body. They kind of, we do something so that they kind of get it out onto the piece of paper, and then we share that. And then, we kind of released from that.
Wow.
Um, then we started doing Deaf Stories open mic. So people started to say, "Oh, well, the grief gathering is very intimate, but I'm not really ready to tell my story. I don't want to share my story in a small group." So we're like, "Well, okay, let's start an open mic at a different venue." And at that one, it's very public. It's literally got a little stage in a venue in Olympia, and people have 10 minutes to tell their story, and you can just come and listen. If you're not ready to share, you just listen to other stories, and we kind of get through maybe about 6 or 7 stories on that evening. Um, and obviously for many people, it's helpful to tell their story and be heard and be listened to,
Mhm.
and have people witnessing their grief and witnessing their experience. Um, and actually, we find it hard to stop people at 10 minutes because it feels like people have not had the arena or space to tell their story, and suddenly we're here saying, "Please tell us your story," and they're like, "I can't fit it all in 10 minutes."
Mhm.
So many layers to each story around end of life or grief.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we finally come back each time and tell a different part of their story.
Mm.
It builds and people get to know each other's stories deeper. So we did that, and then we started doing some events at the cemetery. So we started doing art workshops at the cemetery. So that was just to get people out in the cemetery and again more familiar, being around death in a different way, be
Mhm.
more comfortable to talk about it. Um, and then the arts walk developed where everyone's like, okay, are you going to do arts walk again this year? And I've been so busy with all these other events that my own art practice was a little bit on the back burner. And I was like, well, I've got lots of ideas, but I've not got as much time to make that many this time. Um, and then somebody came up with an idea. Well, why don't we invite other artists
Mhm.
to, share their process? So I just put out that call, like calling all artists. Does anybody want to show their art around death, dying, or grief? And what happened was, this was like a year ago, almost a year ago, I put that out. And then slowly people started, contacting me and saying, oh, I've heard, I'm an artist and I've got some work. And then it just built and built, obviously. And then word of mouth got out. And then I'd just be at something and then they'd be like, oh, I heard you're doing a arts walk. I've already been pieces about my grief process. So
Nice.
now we've got, I would say, over 30 artists in this kind
Wow.
of class.
Right. And so that's coming up here in October again, right? You said?
Yeah, so the
Yeah.
3rd and 4th of October in Olympia as part of their biannual arts walk. And then we're also gonna do some extra events the day after in the same
Nice.
venue. So we're renting it for, like, the whole week.
Wow. So you guys are just putting together a whole vast experience, many, many different ways to approach this. I appreciate that so
Mhm.
much. That's so needed. So, yeah, so thank you for that work. So what do you find are your biggest challenges with this work?
Um, yeah, it's interesting because I guess I feel like, there is definitely a more openness now. People are starting to talk about it more. There's definitely that in general, and more people are saying, "Oh, I feel called to be an end of life doula," and more people are doing the training, and there's more training available. Um, but at the same time, I feel like people are still kind of nervous to dip their toe in. They act like day-to-day people, it's still, like, a big thing for them to start having that conversation. So I think I don't know if it is a challenge, but I feel constantly we're having to remind people, like, "It's okay, it's okay. It's okay to talk about your story." You're allowed to share your emotions, you're allowed to share your grief story. So we're constantly thinking of ways to do that just so people I think them also witnessing other people doing it, that, it has some kinda symbiosis, and they see that, and they're like, "Oh, okay, that seems okay, I can do this." And then next time, they'll chip in. But I think for me, a challenge, I guess, and this is just part of my process, is I'm not a trained grief therapist.
Hmm.
Um, so it's more like it feels more like we're doing it as like a peer support, like we're helping each other in community.
Sure.
Um, so it's kind of a journey for all of us because we're all bringing our griefs to the table, and we're all saying, okay, well, this is my process, and
Right.
for me, I'm using art a lot in my process, and but I'm kinda so it's more about the challenge of remaining open to what other people's experiences are as we go, and, like, listening to what they need and what they're saying, how that might work for them or not. And I would say, and this is not necessarily my challenge or our challenge, but just a phenomenon in the world, there is a lot of grief out there.
Yeah.
People are carrying so
Mhm.
much grief,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
not just about someone they've lost, but, about all sorts of things in our life,
That's
the grief
right.
that we carry. So I'm realizing, wow, people like this is the first time for so many people, especially some older people who are being told, yeah, share it, tell your story. And that's sometimes a challenge to hold all that and to try and say, okay, well, or also to say, well, I don't need to hold all that, but I need to
Mhm.
witness and honor your story without kind of taking on the grief you're carrying. But how do we transform that, and how do we like
Mhm.
work through that in community? I guess.
Yeah. Well, I'm really curious about this transformative potential that you have been like just inundated with. So at the beginning, you mentioned that you were a Buddhist
Mm,
nun, and that you also recognized that you were very stressed or anxious about dying. So has this process over the last year and a half shifted this anxiety? What worries you about the end of life for you now?
Interesting. Good question. Wow. Yeah, I sometimes check in on myself and say, yeah, how am I doing with that? Um, I would say a number of answers to that. So one, I think for me at the time, it was identifying, or what I've identified since this process is, I think some of us just as human beings just feel we need community, we need a support network. And I think for me at the time, I didn't feel a strong support network.
Mhm.
So it was all those kind of practical things of like, oh, what's going to happen to my dogs? What's going to happen to this? Like not being ready to let go because things weren't taken care of. That
Right.
whole kind of process we talk about of getting everything in order. And maybe because I was only in my late 40s, I didn't maybe think I had got a will, but I'd not thought, as I kind of thought it's not going to happen yet, so I don't need to take care of that. So I think a lot of it was probably coming from that practicality. And now I would say I'm a bit more prepared. But
Mhm.
I still have these conversations with friends. I'm honest with them, and I'm saying, yeah, like when I'm sick sometimes, still I will say, oh yeah, I'm still worried about the dogs, and uh, yeah, it's probably mainly worried about my dogs now.
Yeah.
Like you worry about your children. So I would say my anxiety is less, but it's more that I understand it better than I did, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
I'd say at the
Right.
time it was more kinda emotional and more of a, overwhelm, and now it's
Mhm.
like, "Oh, okay, I understand where this is coming from," and again, I'm no different to anyone else, and, we all experience these emotions, and it's more about me being honest and being able to say to people, "Yeah, I need support, I need help." Um, I sometimes when I'm sick, I still go through every time I'm sick or have any symptoms, I still go through this like, "Oh, I might die today. It could be it. This is it again." And I kind of revisit all of that. And sometimes I have a bit of anxiety again, and sometimes
Mhm.
I'm more like accepting and more like, "Well, I guess I guess if it's it, it's it."
Mhm.
So I kind of
Yeah.
oscillate between the 2 if I'm, honest,
Yeah.
Mhm.
depending on it. Yeah.
Well, let me just tell you, you can have your will and you can have a little trust for your pets. Like, I have heard that people leave
Mhm.
trust for the care
Yeah.
of their fur babies, and
Yeah.
so you could just write it up for them and,
Yeah.
get it
Yeah.
done and be it notarized, and they're gonna be fine.
Yeah. It's just knowing. I have actually allocated I've got a very tiny pension in England, and I've allocated a small part of that for the dogs, and I have told a friend it's in her name, so I have said that's for the dogs.
Oh,
Yeah,
great.
just write it
Yeah.
down.
Yeah,
Yeah, right. Yeah,
yeah,
that's our message every time. Write it down, make sure people know where it is. Yeah, I also appreciate what you said earlier about, witnessing, but
Right,
trying not to trying not to
right.
carry other people's grief and that's
Mhm,
such an, incredible and
mhm,
wonderful and valuable, service to do for anybody to do for anybody else, but
mm,
specifically to have made that your life's work in a way.
mhm,
We really appreciate that people like you are out there doing this work. It's so
mhm,
important. So thanks for bringing that up. I think that's for folks, especially folks in the audience who are starting to feel like they want to do this work maybe, or that they already do it just because they're humans.
mhm,
um, just to be able to be in that place of witnessing, compassionate listening,
mhm.
and but not let it become your weight.
That's
Somehow be able
right.
to not have to hold it for other people. So
Mhm.
very very good and very important. Thanks.
Reminder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, how do you when things get overwhelming, and I know they must, because all that
mm.
stuff you're talking about, man, that's a lot.
Mhm.
When things gets overwhelming, how do you, resource yourself? What kind of practices do you have that help you keep going?
Yeah, I say, breathing.
Yeah.
Breath work or breathing meditation, I'd say, has took on a different level of meaning to when I used to teach it and when I was a Buddhist nun and when I was younger. And now it just feels a whole different, like, gratefulness for that breath and,
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
like, understanding of, like, "Oh my goodness, yeah, breathing's so important," and, yeah, so I would say, those kind of things, breath work. I'm quite interested in sound healing, so for me, I often, end up putting on, certain
Mhm.
sound healing, different frequencies. I do believe in that. We do try and bring that into our work sometimes as well. Um, and I just think, getting out in nature with my dogs, going for walks,
Mhm.
just trying to release. And yeah, I don't know if this is the right kind of answers you were meaning, but,
That's perfect.
yeah, that help us. And I guess just again for me, that support network and having I would say a lot of my friends now, my main friends are within that same community.
Mhm.
And, I mean, because 'cause I've not lived here. I've only lived in Olympia 3 years, so, I've had to build a new friendship circle here anyway. But what I find is or what we say that we find is when you get to know people in this kind of deaf conscious community, because people, have authentic conversations about death and dying and feelings and emotions and, like, really raw stuff, they become really dependable people because
Mm.
they're kind of authentic people because you
Yeah.
get to know all parts of them in a way over time. So the friendships and relationships really go really deep. It feels like you really are there for each other, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
So I feel that that is really valuable, I guess, for me. That again, I'm not holding everything. It's like we're all holding each other somehow. And
Mhm.
I think that trusting in that authenticness, it just means that, if I do get overwhelmed or I do need support, it's like I can have those honest conversations with those people.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
great. Yeah. Yeah, the community becomes really important in this work for sure.
Mhm.
And
Mm,
of course, getting into nature. Nature's our
Right.
other community.
Right.
yeah,
It's very
right.
important. Yeah.
So we always ask our guests, like, is there something you wish we had asked you?
Yeah. Let me see. Um, let's see from my notes. I guess maybe what our vision is for the future, like where we want to take this, because there is
Okay.
some other
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
I could mention. Um, yeah. So although we're creating many, what's the word, like temporary spaces, that's a big part. We kind of formed our mission statement that we're creating spaces for people to tell stories, to share their experiences, um, to kind of have these conversations around death and grief. I think we feel like, it's not enough for the people that are benefiting. It's like we need more things happening more often and in more days of the month.
mm,
For
Mhm.
people, they can't always wait for that once a month grief gathering. They
yeah.
just need support now. Today, when they're having a bad day and they just want to connect with somebody who gets where they're at. And so our real vision is to get a permanent space in town. That is where we're heading. It's
Mm.
Mm,
a place where people can, it's not necessarily gonna be open 24/7, but, be clearer, like, somebody's here at certain times of day, and these events are always happening, so there's always gonna be someone you can kinda chat with before or after the event. So it's just a lot more, again, that building that community, but in a physical space.
Mhm.
And I guess that's our vision is, and I know some other places are starting to do this as well, but our vision is, that every town would have a place like that.
mhm.
Um and I know there's already, grief support out there, there's already hospice, there's already many things, but we're finding there's a lot of people whose experience around end of life is not fitting into those
Yeah.
Mhm.
structures that are available. And they're
That's right.
saying, you know, so there's so many things that I think we're offering that we're kind of all those things that fall through the cracks and people don't feel they know where to go for support. So we want a place where all of that's kind of held, I guess, and everybody
Mhm.
can be bring their experience to it.
Mm,
Um, yeah, so that's our ultimate vision is
That's
to kind of
beautiful,
bring it into the community directly.
yeah.
beautiful vision.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I love the idea everybody should have one of those in their town.
It
So
counts, that's right.
every town should have it. It should be a new institution, like the post office and the library and the grief center.
That's right. Ugh.
Definitely, yes. I think I kind of see it. I think in 50 years time or 100 years time, it's doable. I think it's
Mhm.
doable. I think I can see our society having that, especially Western society. I just think we've lost touch with that, and
Yeah,
I think I can
absolutely.
see future humans being able to do that. I think
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's
yeah.
my hope.
I know some in Oregon and some in I think there's some in,
Mhm.
Colorado, and so, yeah, there are places where those things are starting to happen, like you said.
And I think
Yeah.
you're right too, because, we do have a lot of deaths before us. Like, we have a very large part of our community who will be transitioning,
Right.
and more people will be kind of in that realm a lot more than we have
Mhm,
been. And
mhm.
Right.
so there are going to be a lot of questions. There's going to be a lot of heartache. There's going to be a lot of what? And I want that grief center to be there. So that to
Yeah.
support all
Yeah.
those folk.
Yeah, well, we've talked about grief and loss apply to so many other things too.
Hmm.
The grief for the planet, the grief for the democracy, you know, uh, so many things that people are grieving and feeling at a
Hmm.
loss and feeling, like they need support. So, yeah, I think
Hmm.
that would be a great service to have in every single town. I think we should
Yeah,
advocate for that. And the other
that's
thing that
right.
would be really cool would be if people like yourself who are already doing stuff like that could communicate, start getting connected, and start share resources with each other and
Hmm.
share ideas with each other, help each other
Yeah.
build that community, that
Yeah.
extra community.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I think we
cool.
also want to do that with the arts. So we also hope that every town would have a, like an arts walk event with all their artists as well. So we're actually working on a documentary as well this year. But this
Oh,
one
nice.
to
That's
just
lovely.
something like that, so we can share that or inspire other people to do it. Because what we're finding as well is people have already made their art. There's only a few of those 30 in our arts walk that are starting from scratch or saying, "Oh yeah, I'll start making some art." majority of people have already been doing this for years and years and years, and
Mhm.
they're just
Mhm.
shocking at art. So it's already out there. People are already
Mhm.
doing this in the process. I
Mhm.
just really want to promote that idea that, well, let's show it. Let's bring it out of your house and show other
That's right.
people they can have these conversations as well.
Yeah,
That's
wonderful.
right. Great.
Well, thank you so much. Appreciate this has been a great
Mhm.
conversation. We really appreciate you. You brought us a poem that you had written called "What If."
So this poem I wrote for a grief gathering. I often say I feel like I download things, so a lot of the things kind of come through me, or I feel inspired about what we're going to do and what topics to say. So this really came through me as a poem. Think the night before the group gathering, and it's a lot longer. And I kind of presented it more as a meditation, and I guided everybody through it as a guided meditation. But for this version for you, I just kind of shortened it. So it's called What If, and it's really about just some considerations about how we normally deal with grief, and like considering is there some other ways that we can relate to it that actually might not be ways we thought of before.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I will go ahead and read. Okay. So, what if I wasn't meant to fight my grief? What if I was meant to feel my grief? What if I wasn't meant to move on from my grief? What if I was meant to keep my grief moving, changing, transforming? What if I wasn't meant to grieve alone, sat in my house, carrying all of these new emotions in my body? What if I was meant to grieve in community, with others, alongside others, recognizing and mirroring the emotions we all carry, the experiences we all share? What if I didn't need to carry my grief like a heavy load? What if I could allow myself to share my story with others so I could put the load down and we can all deeply listen to each other? What if my grief wasn't a burden laid at my doorstep or like a ton of bricks someone gave me to carry on my back? What if my grief is a gift someone passed to me to tend, to consider, to care for, a reminder of my love for them and the joys we shared together? What if I wasn't meant to get over my grief? What if I was meant to just sit with it, like sitting on a bench with a friend, a cup of tea in our hands, watching the sunset on a perfect blue sky day? What if my grief isn't a portal to my pain? What if my grief is a portal to my joy?
Uh,
Hmm. Oh, that grief, the burdened,
yeah, I
the
love
load
that.
of bricks.
I love the visual of sitting on a park bench watching the sunset with your grief next
Mhm.
door, having a cup of tea.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, that's such a good reminder that we can be with it without allowing
Mhm.
it to, or
Mhm.
without being overwhelmed by it. So, well,
Mhm.
thank you again so much. It's really been a pleasure, Jenny.
Thank you. Have a lovely day.
Thank you for joining us today. Please stick around after the credits for our afterthoughts, and it helps our numbers if you stay until the end. We want to thank my children, Nate, Vivian, Nina, and her fiance Asher, for the excellent opening song, and a special thanks to our awesome editor, Sam Zemke, who is also a guest on our podcast. You can listen to him on Season 4, Episode 5. Also, thank you to Charles Heaston, the composer of the original music you are listening to now.
And of course, thanks to you, our audience, and all of our amazing guests. Please come back next week for another great episode. Share this with your friends, family, and community. We hope you will subscribe and follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, and Substack. Each guest's additional information will be found in the podcast notes. And of course, if you have a good end-of-life story to share, please reach out. We are always eager to hear from you.
Okay.
Such a tender heart.
Yeah, yeah. And my
Such
God, just like taking it and running with it, you know? It's like just here we are. Let's see what can we do? What else can we
Mhm.
do? What else can we do? What else can we do?
She has
So,
made a buffet of how to help all of us. It's
yeah.
so amazing. I kind of would love to go hear her open mic night. Like, it reminds
Wouldn't
me of
that
The
be
Moth,
interesting? Yeah.
right? Like, "Oh, well, let's go here." Yeah,
Yeah.
I really like that.
Yeah. I hear more and more storytelling kind of, and they're all pretty much in that same format to just get up and
Mhm.
tell your story in 10 minutes, but to be able to have it
Distill
specifically,
it.
yeah,
Mhm.
created for that purpose. It's really, really beautiful.
Mhm.
Well, once again, we are
Yeah.
blessed.
Thank you.
All right. We'll see you again in a bit.
A bit, yes.
All right.
Adios.
Much love.